Parent Plus loans, one of the faster growing forms of federal student loan debt out there, and they're in the name of your parent. You can only borrow Parent Plus loans if you have a student in an undergrad program, and they can get expensive. The interest rates are usually a lot higher than what you could borrow as the student, and the balances can start to be, up there with the cost of attendance getting higher and higher. So I wanted to review some questions that I'm seeing in our Facebook channel, the Parent Plus support group Facebook channel. And I think today we're going to cover a lot of different repayment questions, but also financial planning related questions as it comes to those who have Parent Plus loans. So let's jump in. My daughter has a Parent Plus loan in my name, currently in forbearance because she can't afford to start paying them yet. I file married filing separately this year. Husband makes $110,000. I make $45,000. Will that lower my payments? Another fact that's important to this is in the comment section, they say that they did consolidate their loans. So with Parent Plus loans, if you consolidate your loans all together into a direct consolidation loan, still with the federal system, you have access to one income-driven plan called Income Contingent Repayment, or ICR for short. That's based on 20% of discretionary income. So it bases the payment off of a derivative of your income there, 20%. What they do is they take your adjusted gross income, so AGI, from the tax return, which is line 11 on the 1040, or you could look at your W-2, box 1. That's another example of something close to your AGI. And if we file taxes married jointly, the payment is going to be based off of your joint income with your income and your spouse's income. If you file taxes married separately, ICR will allow you to keep the payment off of just your income, which can be super helpful because it keeps the payment a lot lower. So in this case, she's asking, did it make sense for us to file separately? And yeah, it probably did if we're trying to keep the payment really low for affordability purposes. Filing separately will keep this payment off of her $45,000 income. If I do a quick number crunch on this, let's say the balance is about $50,000. It's not said in this comment, but about $50,000. We've got our average interest rate of about 8%. Let's say we've got the $45,000 of income this year. $110,000 is our spouse's income. If we file married jointly, our ICR payment would be about $725. If we file married separately, keeping the payment off of just the $45,000 of income, that payment would be about $400. So it does make the payment a lot lower. ICR, interestingly, does have a payment cap. There's like a amortization schedule where the payment can't go above what it would take to pay the loan off within a 12-year period. So the balance does kind of matter when we're calculating the payment on income contingent repayment. It can make the payment cap out at a certain amount, but looks like difference between this balance would be about $300 a month. In the comments, there's a couple of good suggestions, check with your accountant to make sure that it's not costing you more in taxes than it is saving you in the student loan payments. That's a real suggestion. That's a good suggestion because filing separately can be more expensive because the other person with the higher income might be taxed in a higher tax bracket, or we might be losing out on certain deductions or credits. So it does make sense to run the numbers both ways, joint and separate, to see what the tax cost would be, tax difference between joint and separate, and what the student loan payment cost difference would be, and then make sure that makes sense. Next up, I completed the double consolidation process last year, and this past November submitted the IDR form to apply for SAVE, knowing it was on pause. I was hopeful it would come back into play. 2 months later, my IDR form still says I'm in review. Should I resubmit a new IDR form for a different plan? Does the current form in review need to be canceled? This is a good question. The SAVE plan right now has a lot of drama. We're recording this in January of 2025. We're waiting to see if the SAVE plan is going to still exist in a couple months or if they're going to repeal the SAVE plan. So there is a lot of delaying on processing times for applying for an income-driven repayment plan. They mentioned double consolidation in this. Double consolidation is that loophole or that process that we take advantage of to get access to those cheaper income-driven repayment plans. Because in the last example, we talked about ICR, income contingent repayment. That's what we have access to if we simply just consolidate the loans all together into one consolidation loan, and it's 20% of your discretionary income. If you do a double consolidation, which is a specific way of consolidating the loans, then we break open access to plans that are based on 10% and 15% of discretionary income. This is a temporary loophole as of right now. This is supposed to close as of July this year, 2025. So if this is the first time you've heard about double consolidation, you need to read everything about it on our website. So just Google student loan planner, double consolidation. The article that we've got on the website will go through exactly the mechanics of how to do it. I have a video on there telling you how to go through it and complete it. And if you need help, schedule a consultation with us. We have plenty of availability here in January, but it is a process that takes 4 to 6 months. So if you have not started the double consolidation process yet, you need to be starting it no later than by end of January. After that, we're up to their processing times. So we don't know if they'd be able to process things in time to get you in for the double consolidation loophole to be successful. It's possible, but we don't know for sure. And the closer we get to that 6 months running out, the closer and closer we get to like kind of 4 months out from July, the less and less I'm sure that you're going to be able to get it done. So that's something to take a look at if you're looking for even more affordability with your student loan payment. But back to the question, SAVE seems like it's going to be dead in the water. So what I would suggest is probably submitting another IDR form, an income-driven repayment application, but for a different repayment plan that we know is going to stick around. I would go ahead and submit another income-driven application because we think SAVE is not going to go anywhere. They haven't approved new SAVE applications anyways, so it might be better to just get on a plan that we know is going to stick around, especially if you're someone who's working towards forgiveness credit. You could also hold tight and just wait to see what's going to happen. You're likely in a forbearance, but if you're not on SAVE and not in the SAVE forbearance, interest is still accruing and it's not accruing any kind of forgiveness credit. So again, if you're really banking on credit going towards loan forgiveness for any reason, PSLF or the longer term forgiveness, then you might as well get on a plan that's going to count towards something. Next up. Anyone know if the forgiveness date you see when you use the loan simulator on StudentAid.gov is the accurate date? Nelnet will not tell me if the adjustment has been applied or what my eligible date for forgiveness will be. Neither will StudentAid. But I noticed forgiveness dates on the loan simulator, and if it's accurate, then did they apply the adjustment and knocked significant time off or what? So PSLF folks have a way to check for where they're at on their forgiveness timeline. It's on the StudentAid.gov website under the PSLF section. You can see your PSLF payment tracker where it counts up the eligible payments towards that program. But currently, there is not something like that for the longer term forgiveness folks on an income-driven repayment plan. They're supposed to be soon. They keep saying it's coming. We did find a back-end way to go and find what your estimated payment count is towards the longer term forgiveness. And from what I can tell, it seems like it's counting forbearances and like the things that we're supposed to count through the IDR account adjustment. So what you would do is log into your StudentAid.gov account. Make sure that's up in a browser, and then in another tab, click on this link or type it into the browser. I'll have this in the show notes. And what'll show up is a payment count. And it's going to look kind of crazy, but if you do Command F or Control F to search, you can search IBR, income-based repayment, IBR, or SAVE, SAVE, or ICR to see what that estimated payment count is. As you read through that line, you'll be able to see something that says qualifying payment count. It'll have a number. And then the next section will be forgiveness required payments. And it'll say either 300 or 240 if we're looking at the 20-year plan, or the 25-year plan is the 300 months. And then it will say forgiveness remaining payments. This is a good indicator on where you should be with your payment count. So take this kind of with a grain of salt because it's not obviously published anywhere, but this is the back end way we've been able to see an estimate on people's payment counts towards the loan forgiveness timeline. Next up, so in regards to Parent Plus loans, if we want to refinance upon students' graduation, is there an option to refinance to split it between the parent and the student? My daughter really wants to go to an out-of-state school, but we would only agree to pay back the amount of an in-state tuition cost. I know ultimately it's our responsibility, just wondering if there's a way to split it up after college. This is a good question. And yes, the answer is you could refinance a part of the loans into your daughter's name name after graduation and refinance a part into your own name after graduation. Some of the comments on here I think are confusing, like consolidation and refinance. Consolidation is combining the loans in the federal system, keeping them federal. You cannot move a Parent Plus loan from a Parent Plus loan to the student within the federal system. But I don't think that's what this person was asking. I think they were asking if they could just refinance or like put it into the student's name later after graduation. And the answer to that is yes. You can refinance or privatize a part or all of the Parent Plus loans into the student's name. You may still have to co-sign on the loan. That's something to keep in mind, but you can refinance it into their name. And then maybe that loan has like a co-sign release clause at some point where after on-time good payments, you're released from the co-sign situation, or they can go and refinance it again in the future with a different private company and remove you from the private loan altogether. I'm just curious, will Parent Plus loans ever be eligible for other income-based plans other than ICR without having to do the double consolidation? Why or why not? This is a great question and something that I get frustrated about because I feel like there should be more affordable payment options for Parent Plus loans. They're federal loans borrowed for an education. I would love to see income-driven repayment plans be offered, or more income-driven repayment plans be offered to Parent Plus loans, but that's not how the law has been written at this point. So they're closing the double consolidation loophole coming up because Parent Plus loans were not intended to have access to these income-driven plans. That's why they're closing it, essentially. So I wish there were cheaper options without having to go through that wonky process, but unfortunately, ICR is the only income-driven plan, especially after this double consolidation loophole closes. But it is still a great option, and you can still be strategic with who borrows the Parent Plus loan as a parent. So if you are a parent who makes less income than your spouse, it might make sense for you to borrow the Parent Plus loan because you guys could consider filing taxes married separately later. And if you make less income than your spouse, your payment will be less. It's also smart to consider who's working in public service or who may at some point work in public service or be full-time in public service, because Parent Plus loans can go towards PSLF as long as the parent who has the loans is working in a public service capacity, and they can get loan forgiveness after 120 qualifying payments on ICR. So it's still eligible for these forgiveness programs. ICR has loan forgiveness after 25 years if we're not working in public service. So there's still options there, and we can still be pretty strategic when it comes to who borrows the loan in the future. But unfortunately, we don't have access to those cheaper plans that your students or your kids have access to naturally. How long approximately does it take for Aid Advantage and EdFinancial to answer once they've received the initial consolidation paperwork? This is for the double consolidation. It typically takes 30 to 90 days for a consolidation to process. Usually I have folks hear back as far as like that first point of contact where the servicers say, hey, we've got your information, we're working on consolidating. I usually see that get received within 30 days of submitting the application. And then within the next 30 days, they're getting what I call like the confirmation letter. That's the servicer saying, hey, these are the loans we plan on consolidating. And that's your chance to double check them to make sure that they're consolidating the correct loans for that double consolidation process. They should only be doing the ones that you told them to do. And then if everything looks good, you don't have to respond. You just let them process it. And then within the next 30 days, the consolidation is complete. That's typically the timeline I see, 30 to 90 days total. So, and it could vary anywhere in between that 30 to 90 days, depending on like their processing times and how fast it is for them to get back to you on things. But that's generally what I see. Folks in the comments are saying too that they heard back from Aid Advantage pretty quickly. They were still waiting on hearing back from EdFinancial though. And that's the thing, like the different servicers have different processing times just depending on their workload. Someone else said, I used Aid Advantage and Mohila. Aid Advantage answered within 3 to 4 weeks. I still have not heard anything from Mohila, and it's been 7 weeks. And that could be the case. If it's still within that 90-day window of time, they're still within their processing window. So it should happen soon. And you can always call to follow up to make sure that they've gotten the applications. This is also why I recommend submitting these applications, because we mail them out initially, that you mail them certified mail. Not necessarily with signed receipt because it goes to a PO box. No one's going to be there to sign it, but it would be nice to have like a receipt saying like, yep, it definitely got dropped off in that PO box. So I recommend certified mail just to give you some peace of mind to know that they should have actually gotten it, or else you can call to confirm that they've got it. What happens when we retire and we haven't finished paying off our loans? So, since Parent Plus loans do have access to the income driven repayment plans, the payment is based on income. So, when you go to retire, you may have different income, right? You won't have like your active paychecks anymore, but you'll be living off of either Social Security or a pension or 401k withdrawals, all of which could be taxable to an extent. It depends on what your tax rate is and what type of asset you're drawing from. But whatever your income is at that time, your adjusted gross income is at that time will be what your payment is based off of. So you can recalculate your payment to stay proportionate to whatever income you're bringing in at that time, which is nice. ICR has a 25-year timeline to forgiveness. If we've done IBR and we have loans as of like we didn't have any loans before July 2014, our timeline is 20 years. If we've done the double consolidation and we're on pay, our timeline is 20 years to forgiveness. And if we are on IBR and we have older loans, we borrowed pre-October 2007, then our payment is the 15% of discretionary income, and then the forgiveness timeline is 25 years. So we could have forgiveness within 20 or 25 years, depending on your repayment plan and depending on if you did the double consolidation or not. And so you make payments for that period of time, and whatever balance is left over at the end of that time frame is then forgiven. So there is an end in sight, which is nice. We know that there will be some kind of hard stop unless we pay the loan off before we get there to that forgiveness threshold. And that just depends on the math. Question. My Nelnet loan is in deferment due to hurricanes for 3 months. How do I make an interest-only payment? I know how much interest is. Will they automatically know it's supposed to go towards interest? Maybe a dumb question. It's just not clear when I log in. Thanks so much. So, not a dumb question. It's pretty complicated, actually. How the hierarchy order works for student loans is when you make a payment, it's first going to go to current interest being charged, and then it's going to go to any past accumulated interest that is unpaid. That could be possible where you have accrued interest that is sitting there in this accrued interest bucket that hasn't been paid yet, either because you're on an income-driven plan and the payment isn't enough to pay the interest each month, or you were in forbearance and interest accumulated while you were in that forbearance period. So when you make a payment, it is going to go straight to interest first. And once that interest is completely satisfied, current interest is satisfied, there's no accrued interest left, anything additionally goes towards principal. So if you're trying to make an interest-only payment right now and you have accrued interest, it's going to go to the accrued interest right now. Otherwise, it'll start touching the principal, which is actually a good thing. It reduces the principal balance, which then interest is charged off of. And the lower the principal balance, the lower the interest cost. All right, last question. So if my student wants to go into nursing and wants to do her own loan forgiveness, can she apply for private loans with us co-signing and refinance into a federal loan to do loan forgiveness herself after 10 years? With only being eligible for $5,500 her first year, obviously isn't going to be enough, but wasn't sure if private loans could work. This is so overwhelming. And you're right, this stuff is pretty overwhelming. Unfortunately, private loans cannot be converted into federal loans. But I understand what you're saying, where the student in this case can only borrow up to $5,500 in federal student loans under their own name. And federal student loans, they're eligible for PSLF. Private student loans are not. So to fund the rest of the cost of attendance, if it's greater than that $5,500 amount that the student can borrow for themselves, you may have to borrow private student loans or may look at Parent Plus loans if that makes sense for you. But they're not going to be eligible. That portion of the loans is not going to be eligible for PSLF under your daughter in this case, because they won't be under her name, or they'll be private loans, which are not eligible for PSLF. Only federal student loans under the borrower's name are eligible for PSLF if the borrower is working full-time at an eligible employer. Good questions. This was a good roundup of Parent Plus questions as it relates to repayment, income-driven repayment, the pesky double consolidation loophole. Make sure if you need to look into that, you're doing that now in January. This is kind of the last time frame for when you can start that process if you're looking at getting that process done. Check us out at StudentLoanPlanner.com if you need some one-on-one help. We're here to help. If you need some assistance or additional details on some of these things we talked about today, check out our blog first for some free education. Our YouTube channel, we have a couple other videos as it relates to Parent Plus loans and Parent Plus situations. And of course, just let us know if we can help. Catch you in the next one.